Chapter 17. The New Priorities. 1991. I'm an old historian, and one of the things that are mysteries to historians is those periods every 200 or 300 years when suddenly the world changes. It's like turning a kaleidoscope. The pieces are the same, but their meaning is totally different. And the people who survived that period usually can't figure out what the world was like before it changed. That was the situation around 1500. Next door to us is the wonderful exhibition of the World of Columbus in 1492. That was such a period of change. We have a letter from a very distinguished man of 1525, after the Reformation, who said, "I've been trying to explain to my son what the world looked like when I grew up in the 1480s, and I can't." And we had the same phenomenon 200 years ago. It began with the American Revolution, and 50 years later, after the Napoleonic Wars, I don't think anybody could have understood what the world was like when his father was born. We are living in such a period. My guess is that we're more than halfway through it, but only about halfway. It's a period that began around 1973, and it's been moving very fast. Just to show you how fast, I published a book, The New Realities, that I finished around September 1988. I published it in the spring of '89, and it didn't predict, it just took notice of the impending collapse of communism and the dissolution of the communist empire. It came out in early '89, 2.5 years ago, and every reviewer said, "This man is crazy." And my publisher asked Henry Kissinger to review it, and Henry wrote back and said, "I've known Peter for many years. I don't want to say that he's become gaga." That was early 1989. For the first time in my 40 years with that publisher, he made me take out the sentence in which I said that I considered it highly probable that within the next 5 years, Germany would be reunified. He said, "Look, Peter, at your age, you don't have to make a total ass of yourself." And I didn't predict. I just looked out the window. I don't predict. I learned that in 1929. I got my first decent job with a major English newspaper, and I predicted in October 29 that the New York Stock Exchange crash couldn't last. I'm not going to predict anymore. So, no, I just looked out the window. And that's only 2.5 years ago. It was very clear that Mr. Gorbachev couldn't succeed. You didn't have to predict it. It was very clear that the Russian Empire would dissolve. You didn't have to predict it. But nobody could imagine it. As you know, Mr. James Baker, the Secretary of State, slipped into one of his speeches a very innocent-sounding sentence, in which he basically said, "We in the United States are now ready for the dissolution of China." He didn't put it this way. He put it very diplomatically. But everybody got the message. And I think it very likely that by the end of the century, we will be back to the traditional China, which has a nominal central government that costs a lot of money. And that's about all it does. And where you have economic warlords overseeing different regions. China will also be the center of an economic Far Eastern Union. And so we are in a period of very rapid change, and some of the elements of the new worldview are already pretty clear. Maybe the most important thing is that, since about the French Revolution, we in the developed countries have believed in salvation by society, the secular religion of which communism was the most extreme manifestation. One of my first good jobs was as the Manchester Guardian's correspondent in Moscow in 1929, which, by the way, cured me of ever becoming a left-winger. That was the year Stalin liquidated 20 million kulaks. And I still wake up at night with the screaming jeebies and nightmares.